I drove down the haunted highway and witnessed an unbelievable horror unfold. I never should have opened that door. My heart raced as I glanced at the rearview mirror, the shadows creeping up behind me. It was supposed to be just another late-night drive, my playlist adding a casual touch to the lonely road. But that night, the air felt different. Heavy. An invisible weight that pressed down on my chest. The moon hung high, casting a ghostly glow over the twisted trees lining the road. Their gnarled branches clawed at the darkness, like skeletal fingers reaching for something lost. I could barely breathe as I passed a dilapidated sign that read "Beware, ghosts ahead." I chuckled nervously, but the chill that followed my laughter told me the joke was on me. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the open window, carrying an unsettling whisper. I jerked my head to the side, every hair on my body standing on end. "Did you hear that?" I muttered under my breath, my voice barely audible over the distant howl of the night. I wished I hadn't. The headlights flickered, dancing shadows darting across the road. My palms grew slick on the steering wheel. That's when I saw a figure in the distance, standing in the middle of the asphalt. I squinted, heart pounding, but as I got closer, it vanished into thin air. A trick of the light? Or something more sinister? Every turn felt like a descent into madness. The engine sputtered as if it sensed the fear radiating from me. The radio crackled to life, static hissing like a warning. "Get out, get out!" The voices seeped into my skull, sending icy fingers down my spine. I pressed down on the gas, but the road stretched out infinitely, mocking my desperation. A surge of dread washed over me. My gut twisted as I realized I was not alone. Shadows danced in the periphery, whispers grew louder, filled with urgency. Objects shifted in the car, my phone sliding to the floor, a chill radiating from the back seat, an unsettling feeling of being watched. In that suffocating moment, the darkness felt alive, breathing alongside me. I could barely comprehend what was happening. Each little sound, rustling leaves, a muffled thud, pounded against my skull. My heart raced as I navigated the twists and turns, the figures flickering in and out of sight. My breath quickened. Where were they? Were they watching me? The road started to narrow, boxed in by looming trees that seemed to lean closer. Cold sweat dripped down my temple as I strained to see beyond the carpet of darkness. I gripped the wheel tighter, ready to turn back, but the thought of what might be lurking behind me held me captive. Then, without warning, a scream pierced the silence. A chilling cry that reverberated through my bones. My instinct screamed at me to stop, but I pressed on, the scream echoing in my mind. Then, there it was, Argelina, shadow darting across the road. I slammed on the brakes, tires screeching, but it only blurred in my vision before disappearing. What had I driven into? A realm that should remain untouched? Just as I was about to turn around, the figure suddenly emerged from the trees, silhouetted against the moonlight. I froze. My heart thundered, a deafening drum in the deafening night. What was it? It reached out, its fingers curling in the air, and as I stared, my breath caught in my throat, a scream ready to break free. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. My hands were clammy on the wheel, heart pounding like a war drum as I stared at the figure, unable to blink. It was once Humana, a woman, perhaps her face a canvas of despair, eyes wide and hollow, like two endless voids pulling in the surrounding darkness. I felt an overwhelming urge to scream, but nothing came out. It felt as if the air had turned to ice in my lungs, paralyzing me. As the figure stepped closer, her visage became clearer. Sweat beaded on my forehead as I took in the grotesque details, the sunken cheeks, the cracked lips that seemed to form an unrelenting scream. But it was worse than that. From behind her, shadows spilled forth like ink spilled on parchment, twisting and writhing, indeterminate forms filling the empty space, hungry for something I couldn't comprehend. I slammed my foot on the gas, my tires screaming as I tore away from that haunting face, the whispers urging me to leave echoing in my mind. The road twisted into a nightmarish path, the asphalt giving way to soft grass, then to gravel beneath the tires, lurching violently beneath the shifting weight as I desperately searched for an escape. But it was as though the road itself was alive, mischievous, guiding me further into the clutches of the unknown. I turned sharply around a corner, and suddenly, the air grew thick with fog, a ghostly barrier that cloaked everything in a suffocating embrace. My headlight struggled against the encroaching mist, illuminating only fleeting glimpses: a bent sign, a tattered flag, the silhouette of a looming tree, branches splayed out like the fingers of a giant hand. And then came the laughter. A sinister cackle, echoing in the stillness, a sound that pierced through the fog and wrapped around my throat like a noose. I knew then that whatever had been haunting me had taken on a new form. My stomach churned as the laughter grew louder, mingling with the rustling of branches that sounded like whispers of long-forgotten souls. "Turn back," the whispers beckoned, "you don't belong here." I shook my head violently, my vision blurring. Images flickered in the fog like a forgotten past replaying in real time. I saw children playing amid the trees, their laughter warm and bright. But then, with each heartbeat, the joy dissolved, their forms turning grey and misty, faces twisted in pain. They looked at me, soft eyes filled with sorrow as if pleading for help from a place beyond comprehension. Suddenly, the laughter morphed into cries. The ghastly sound of anguish that clawed at my sanity. I couldn't take it anymore. I swerved violently, desperate to steer off the path, only to find myself crashing through a hiding wall of fog, rocks scraping against the undercarriage until it sounded as if the vehicle itself was screaming. I came to an abrupt stop, lungs working overtime as I grappled for control. I had become lost in a web of torment. Outside the car, the fog thickened, and shadows coalesced into shapes that circled closer. I noticed the silhouette of a stone structure emerging from the depths, a structure I had not seen before, a crumbling cabin that looked as though it had been pulled from a nightmare before I could even think to turn the car around. Semi-transparent figures emerged like smoke, looming ominously, fingertips grazing the glass as they strained to reach me. Each face was twisted and distorted in unspeakable grief, their silent cries seeping through the air like a toxic mist. My heart flared, dread coursed through my veins like ice. I reached for my phone, desperately checking for service. Nothing. It felt like a cruel trick of fate. Panic seeped in, as I stumbled upon the only option left. The cabin loomed ahead, doors ajar, beckoning me into its maw. Maybe there was someone inside who could help, maybe they could explain this hell I had driven into. But as I stepped out of the car, the ground shifted beneath me, an earthy tremor that sent shivers up my spine. The whispers crescendoed, hollow echoes calling my name. "Come inside." Just then, I felt a hand on my shoulder, a cold, clammy grip that promised silence. I turned, barely able to process the sudden shadow looming inches from my face. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone at all. A rush of icy dread overwhelmed me as I spun around, my heart racing. The figure stood inches from me, a man with sunken eyes and a gaping mouth that twitched unnaturally, as if compelled to utter something beyond the realm of the living. His skin hung loosely from his emaciated frame, and ragged clothes clung to him like remnants of a lost era. I could barely distinguish the contours of his face under the low-hanging fog, yet something about his features struck a chord of horrifying familiarity. His voice emanated from the depths of despair, raspy and hollow, echoing as if the very landscape wished to swallow it whole. "You have to help us." I staggered back, the darkness around me pulsing with shadows that dipped and danced as if relishing in my terror. I searched for the cabin. I needed to retreat, yet I was paralyzed, forced to confront the chilling haze of despair and longing that radiated from him. "Please," he implored again, and the word wrapped around me, sinking its claws into my chest. Something flickered in his sunken eyes, a glimmer of light. Just as quickly, it was smothered by insatiable darkness. "You don't understand." The others we never left. Confusion churned inside me as an oppressive weight descended upon me, making it nearly impossible to breathe. "What do you mean?" I croaked, my voice barely breaking through the thick fog, blending with the whispers that danced around us. "Our souls are trapped here," he rasped, gesturing faintly toward the cabin behind him. "This place, it consumes us. We are part of it now, and soon you will be too." You must escape while you can. His face suddenly twisted in pain, mouth opening wide as he let out a haunting wail that echoed through the night and sent grey tendrils of fog spiraling skyward. The mist thickened and swirled around me, prickling my skin like tiny needles. I felt the shadows around us grow restless, and I realized with a spike of sheer terror that they were hungry. Leave while you can. He yelled again, desperation coating his voice. They'll come for you too. The ground trembled beneath my feet as I fought against the weight of his words. Panic surged again, urging me to run. I barely took a step before another shape emerged from the Foga woman, her fingers twisted and elongated, her mouth contorted into a silent scream. She gazed at me with eyes that held a void deeper than the man's. She reached out, and the fog twisted to reveal more figures emerging from the darkness, each one a reflection of anguish, each one trying to warn me, to pull me into their suffering. Stop! I gasped, stumbling back until I slammed against the cold steel of my car. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of sorrow and longing clawing at my sanity. Get away from me! But they advanced, a swarming tide of ghostly figures, moaning and clawing through the fog. Their eyes, wide and empty, stared into my very soul, and I felt tendrils of icy grasp coiling around my heart. Without thinking, I turned and bolted toward the cabin, the only tangible semblance of hope in this dreadful nightmare. The door creaked open as I approached, beckoning me into a darkness that felt like the bowels of despair itself. I hesitated, half turned back, catching a glimpse of the anguished figures that converged behind me, but the urge to uncover the horror that lay inside was too enticing. In a breathless rush, I crossed the threshold, and the door slammed shut behind me. The cabin was eerily silent, unlike the chaos outside. Dim light from a flickering lantern illuminated the dust-laden furniture, the air thick with the scent of mildew and decay. My heart raced as I approached a rickety table, where faint etchings marred the surface, names, dates, and crude drawings that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. I ran my fingers over them, and the moment my skin made contact, an electric shock coursed through me. In an instant, images flashed through my mind, scenes of laughter, panic, betrayal, and a gathering storm, and then I saw her, the woman from the highway, her visage twisting in pain, appearing to leap from the etching. Drawn toward me with an urgency that shattered my thoughts. She opened her mouth, a silent scream rising like a fog, filling my mind with an echo that resonated with the very marrow of my bones. Suddenly, I heard frantic scratching at the door, the muted cries spilling into the cabin as if the walls themselves recoiled from the horrors lurking outside. The sound morphed into a rhythmic thud, a desperate heartbeat, growing louder, demanding entry. Please let us in, the man's voice wailed through the door, filled with desperation. Panic coursed through me, and everything within screamed to escape. But as I turned, I froze. The shadows inside the cabin began to shift, swirling into violent forms, their whispers turning to banshee wails as the entities inside turned toward me, their hollow eyes reflecting my fear. Stay with us. In that moment, the reality of my existence, of time and sanity, unraveled, and I could feel myself slipping, slowly being pulled into their world, a darkness that promised to erase all light, all life. The door buckled under the relentless assault, and I stood on the precipice of choice here. Desperate flight into the unknown, or submission to an ever-growing void that called to me with insatiable hunger. And just as the door burst open, revealing a churning spiral of despair beyond, I felt a cold, familiar grip clasp around my throat. Join us. Everything went dark. The darkness enveloped me, thick and suffocating, as if I had plunged into a deep, endless void. I gasped for air, feeling the icy fingers at my throat tighten, squeezing the breath from my lungs. A cacophony of whispers rose like a tidal wave, crashing over me, drowning out reality. Join us, echoed the voices from the shadows. They were everywhere, closing in, wrapping around my spirit like chains. Panic surged through me, feeding the terror that pulsed through the suffocating dark. Without understanding how, I was back at the cabin, standing at the threshold once more, the door opening to reveal a hellish landscape of writhing figures. Their sunken eyes locked onto mine, hungry, pleading, each one grasping for recognition, for rescue that would never come. I staggered back, the thin air filled with the weight of their sorrowful cries. Why? I shouted into the void. What do you want from me? Here's our link. The woman's voice pierced through the din. I searched desperately for the source but saw only the darkness bubbling and shifting like molten wax. The figures behind her started to wail again, their voices rising in pitch, forming a ghastly chorus that threatened to drown me. From the wreckage of memories, I caught glimpses of the woman, her terror, her torment. I could see the flicker of her life, the joy that had preceded her anguish. But then an unbearable image invaded my mind, her pleading eyes as she was pulled into the fog, her body vanishing as the shadows claimed her and finished what was started. She screamed before dissolving back into the mass, leaving behind only a lingering chill. The shadows surged, and I stumbled backward, fearing the touch of their cold embrace. The faces of those desperate figures contorted with pain, morphing and twisting as they reached for me, for an answer I couldn't provide. The man I had seen earlier lurked at the fringes, his sunken eyes glistening with cruel understanding. "They won't let you leave," he rasped, the sound a dry rustle in the oppressive atmosphere. "You can't understand until you've felt it. You'll become one of us." Connect with the void. Searing pain lanced through my mind as fragments of their stories flooded in, a torrent of despair pouring like liquid ice. I saw families torn apart, victims of the highway's dark curse, their lives snatched away and imprisoned in this wretched limbo. Each vision clawed deeper, and I felt pieces of my own existence fraying at the edges, unraveling under the weight of their agony. "Leave! You must escape!" The realization burst forth, an echo of the man's earlier plea. But how could I? They were all around me, their haunting smiles and twisted frowns laced with sorrow and malice, a cacophony of souls lost to the very fog I had driven through. Suddenly, the cabin shuddered violently as the figures crashed against its walls, shaking the foundation as if the entire structure itself was about to crumble under the weight of their collective anguish. The wooden beams creaked, splintering in protest, and a furious wind whipped through the cracks in the cabin, sending splinters of dark wood flying. I turned to flee deeper into the cabin, away from the chaos, praying it would shelter me, but the shadows spun, their voices intertwining, lifting to a fever pitch. The air around me thickened, constricting like a vice. "Finish it! You're the key!" they chanted, and I could feel the truth clawing at my mind. As I fumbled through the darkness, I stumbled upon a trap door, its edges worn and frail, with darkness swirling ominously just beneath. It felt like a portal to a world more sinister than this one, a last resort born in desperation. The cabin convulsed again, and with no thoughts left to guide me, I threw myself open, plummeting into the depths below. Cold earth swallowed me, and the darkness enveloped me like a burial shroud, squeezing me tighter. Then, as if my body were a marionette cut loose from its strings, I felt a terrifying sense of weightlessness. Voices spun around me, now echoing from the depths as I floated, pulled between realms of existence. "Join us," came the whisper, ever stronger, and just as I thought I could slip into the dark embrace of the abyss, a hand gripped mine soft and warm against the biting cold. "Help me!" I looked down into the pitch-black void, and terror knotted in my stomach. There, in the darkness, were the faces of the damned, and one was unmistakably my own. The grip of my own hand tightened around the warm one in the darkness, as if a lifeline had been thrown into my abyss. My heart raced, wildly pounding against my ribs, a frantic reminder that I was still alive, still tethered to a reality that felt like a distant memory. Who are you?" I managed to sputter, my voice trembling in the void. "Help me before it's too late," the apparition implored, its voice laced with both desperation and a chilling familiarity that sent ice coursing through my veins. The match of my own face sent a shockwave rippling through my being. How could I see myself down here? The features were twisted, rotting at the edges and leaking despair like an open wound, yet those eyes were unmistakably mine, glistening with a terrifying clarity that paralyzed me. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, the question echoing chaotically into the emptiness around us. "What happened to you?" "I was trapped like you," it replied softly, the voice barely above a whisper, yet echoing profoundly in the chasm of darkness. "You have to break the cycle. You have to find the room with no doors." Paralyzed with fear, I opened my mouth to question what it meant, but my words slipped away, evaporated by the suffocating darkness. The warmth of the grip pulsed with urgency, as if urging me to remember something, anything that could lead me to the escape the apparition spoke of, yet the seeping dread began to morph into something more tangible. The shadows flickered, moaning in reply to the phantom's words, their presence growing sharper, more palpable as cold whispers spiraled around us, layering themselves over my skin, stealing warmth. "Finish it!" they cried, their cacophony rising in a desperate wail. I felt the restraining grip of dread pulling at my limbs, pulling me deeper into the murky depths. My own doppelganger's grip loosened, but the urgency in its eyes smoldered like a dying ember, pleading for me to act. Where? What is this room? I stammered, grappling for any thread of hope that might pull me toward clarity. The apparition shrieked in anguish, its face morphing between fear and recognition, a chasm of horror that threatened to swallow us both. They'll come for you. They know, it hissed, the weight of its gaze capturing mine entirely. The void trembled, rippling violently, and in that moment, I felt the presence of a greater force closing in. Tendrils of shadow twisted and coalesced, morphing into grotesque shapes that resembled the figures from the cabin, their sunken faces etched with cruelty. The emptiness echoed with their Criesa chorus of anguish, breaking the very fabric of my mind. Then, with a sudden surge, the darkness thrashed violently, and the air thickened until it crushed down on me, squeezing the breath from my lungs. I gasped, my body convulsing with panic as waves of shattering despair washed over me. I couldn't hold on much longer. Go! Screamed my doppelganger, the warmth disappearing entirely from my grasp. Find the room. Break the cycle. I felt my limbs flail against the crushing darkness as I stumbled backwards, the visage of my own face melting into a grin of despair before it disappeared entirely. And then, like a cork popping from a bottle, I was thrust upward through the void, the world around me swirling in a kaleidoscope of darkness and chaos. I flailed, desperate for stability, until my head burst through the surface, and I gasped, coughing up the very essence of night itself. I was back in the cabin, but everything had changed. The air felt charged, alive with a palpable dread. The flickering candles on the table cast leering shadows on the walls, forming grotesque figures that twisted and writhed as if tortured. My heart thudded furiously in my chest, and a chill crawled down my spine. In the corner of the room stood a mirror, its surface a surreal reflection of chaos. But there was something else in the glass, a figure pacing behind me, its movements eerily synchronized but twisted. I turned slowly, dread pooling in the pit of my stomach, preparing for the grotesque unveiling, and yet there was nothing, just the cabin, pitch black and festooned with shadows that seemed to leer at me. But then the whispers returned, rising ferociously, resonating in a pitch that shattered the silence of the eerie room. Find the room. Break the cycle. Suddenly, the walls trembled, and the floor beneath me quaked as the trapdoor I had escaped through crashed shut. Light flickered erratically, and then there came a sound. Tendrils of laughter slithered through the air, dark and triumphant. I was not alone. The figures from beyond appeared in the shadowy recesses, their hollow eyes radiating hatred and loss. I staggered back, my breath coming in ragged gasps, and that chilling realization washed over me. I could go nowhere. They had come to collect their due.as. The shadows drew closer, a glimmer on the mirror caught my eye. A doorway etched into its glass surface, faintly illuminated and beckoning me to approach. Heart racing, I reached forward, knowing that this could be my only escape, or perhaps another trap, and without knowing which it was, I crossed the threshold into the darkness beyond. But another voice rang out, one that curled around my heart, a cacophony of familiar laughter. Welcome home, it echoed through the void, leaving me hanging on the edge of a decision that would determine if I would fight or be consumed. As I stepped through that shimmering doorway in the mirror, a shroud of darkness enveloped me, consuming my senses. I stumbled forward into an echoing silence, my heart pummeling against my ribs as the threshold slammed shut behind me with a resounding thud. The faint illumination from the doorway flickered before vanishing entirely, plunging me into a void so profound that I feared I would lose my grip on reality. With barely a breath to spare, I willed my feet to move, the damp ground squelching beneath me, sucking at my shoes as if eager to tether me to this cursed realm. I strained to listen, desperate for any signs of life, any hint that I was not utterly forsaken in this suffocating darkness. But the oppressive quiet was broken only by the tapping of something, an erratic sound that mirrored the rhythm of my heart. I knew now I wasn't alone. The weight of unseen eyes bore down upon me, carving deeper lines of dread across my soul. I pivoted, scanning for shadows, searching for a shape, anything to give me a glimmer of hope. Then, out of the darkness, a soft sound began to resonate, a child's laughter. My stomach churned at the sweetness of it, a cruel taunt in this hellish place. My memories surged forward, each one more piercing than the last, a twisted recollection of a birthday party, balloons bobbing against a sunlit sky, the sheer joy eclipsed by shadowed corners lurking behind the cheery faces of children. I was no longer in the cabin. As the laughter took on a jagged edge, an image flashed in front of me, the haunting faces of those I had loved, their laughter moth-eaten, tinged with despair, flickering like dying flames. Just as the glee morphed into cries of anguish, the shadows coalesced into their ghostly forms, children, their eyes vacant, mouths stretched into silent screams, "Join us!" They pleaded in agony, their voices ringing like the clamor of chains. "We want to play again." Their thin, bony fingers beckoned me, and fear pooled like ice in my veins. I stumbled back, shaking my head in denial. "No. Get away from me," but they drew closer, their laughter perverting into jeers, a cacophony that rattled the very essence of my being. I felt an insidious energy enveloping me, a translucent fog that sought to wrap around my limbs like barbed wire, pulling me into its icy embrace. "Remember us." They sang, their voices intertwining with the shadows, arming their malicious intent with memories I had fought to forget. Images of their fleeting lives surged within me, moments of laughter stolen by the darkness. The path beneath me twisted and warped, weaving like a serpent, and I grasped a nearby tree to steady myself. Its bark was slick and black, as though the very would absorb the dread that permeated the air. The touch sent waves of revulsion through my fingers, but it was either that or crumble to the sly laughter of those lost souls, desperate to escape their hypnotic call. I willed my legs to move, sprinting through the endless expanse of darkness. Just as I thought I could break free, the ground erupted beneath me, as if the very earth convulsed with rage. I plummeted, the void swallowing me whole, the sensation of falling morphed into something altogether different, a floating, disorienting drift through a kaleidoscope of memories. My life unfolded before me, fragmented and grotesque. Each memory dizzied me further, dragging me back to moments I would rather forget: a shattered photo frame, a birthday cake smeared with dirt, the sounds of muffled cries buried deep in my heart. I landed on solid ground, but this ground was unlike any other. It shimmered with an unholy glow, the colors swirling like a tempest, weaving between the shadows that danced around me. I looked up, finally realizing that I stood at the edge of a horrifying abyss, a chasm that stretched to infinity. In its depths, shadows writhed, morphing into the faces of those who had been stripped away, friends, family, all twisted in agony. Each face mirrored the horror I felt in my own heart. With a strangled cry, I clawed backward, but there was no escape from the haunting cacophony that tugged at my very existence. "Remember." They cried again, the shadows merging into one collective voice filled with torment and malice. Then, as if answering their summons, a shimmering light flickered at the edge of the chasm doorway. The very same doorway that had drawn me in, now glimmered, a beacon of hope or an insidious trap that would seal my fate. Just as I extended my hand toward it, the shadows surged, a tidal wave of anguish rushing forth. "You belong with us," they screamed, and a chilling hand, icy and relentless, latched onto my ankle. Panic surged through me as I realized this hand wasn't some figment of my imagination. It belonged to a shadow of my own, an echo of someone who had been at the edge before me, looking for a way out. I wrestled against the grasp, feeling that life, that shimmering light, slipping further from me. My palms squeezed down on the edge of the chasm, my nails biting into the flesh of the shadows that loomed, seeking to pull me back. In that moment, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a shard of glass embedded in the petrified earth. My features were twisted, a emaciated wraith smeared across a canvas of despair, eyes wide with horror at the hand dragging me into the abyss. "Help me!" I screamed, realizing the truth dawning upon me too late. There was no way out from this abyss, nor from the darkness it consumed, and as the grip tightened, I screamed my last plea into the void, surrendering as the shadows drew nearer. But the flickering light beyond the edge pulsed with a pulse so strong that, for just a heartbeat, I felt it could heal me. And in that single fleeting moment, I was torn between the depths and the light before everything shattered around me, and I fell into darkness anew. The darkness folded around me like a tattered shroud, heavy and suffocating, swarming with the whispers of those caught in this endless torment. I surged through the void, a silhouette traversing a landscape riddled with screams unspoken, clawed hands reaching like talons from the shadows. Each ragged breath echoed of despair, mingling with the faint semblance of laughter that flickered at the edges of my sanity. Suddenly, the ground quivered again underfoot, and I staggered as if it sought to entrap me once more. The howls erupted, a cacophony of voices converging into a tempest of agony, families severed by fear, innocents silenced before their time, all clamoring for acknowledgement within the eclipsing gloom. I could sense their anger, their confusion, spiraling into a vortex of unending sorrow. A vision unspooled before me, children's shoes abandoned on a cracked pavement, the remnants of joy disintegrating in the dusk. I felt myself pulled toward them, inexorably drawn as if they were an anchor to my own lost innocence. I fought against this magnetic pull, urging myself to disconnect from the web of memories, but it was futile. The shadows reached, eager to envelop my soul. "Stay with us," they chorused, the voices now low and resonant, echoing like waves crashing upon a distant shore. "You cannot flee what you are." With a furious effort, I pivoted on my heel and sprinted. The darkness writhed and slithered around my ankles, a gripping terror that threatened to hold me fast. My heart raced, pounding against my ribcage, pushing me toward the uncertain hope of that glimmering light at the precipice of the chasm. Beneath me, the earth began to churn, swirling with colors that defied description, deep purples, sickly greens, and sinister reds swirling in torment. Before I knew it, the ground thinned beneath my feet, breaking apart like splintering glass, threatening to drop me into the abyss below. The laughter turned to twisted sobs, the kind that rends the heart, and I closed my eyes, trying to blank out their sorrowful requiem. Then a new sound broke through the shrill ring of a bell, incessant and jarring, intertwined with the echoes of laughter and cries. It resonated from a place less than distant, more like an agonizing familiarity painting the very air around me. The shadows recoiled for a moment, hesitating as if they too were struck by the chime's tone. I couldn't help but succumb to the allure of its eerie melody. "Come home," it murmured, honeyed words tainted by bitterness. I crept through the dark toward the direction of the sound, heart thrumming wildly as vision surged. I beheld gnarled silhouettes standing just beyond my view, coalescing into a fog that beckoned me closer. A fire crackled somewhere, a beacon amid the tempest of dread. I squeezed through the tendrils of darkness, and as I did, the shadows lunged, reaching with long, skeletal fingers, urging me back into the fold. They pulled at my limbs, straining against my resolve, but I kept moving, driven by the need to understand the source of that haunting chime. In what felt like an eternity, I burst through the last veil of darkness and arrived at a swirling mist, clearing just enough to reveal a dilapidated carnival, its colors faded and peeling, adorned with the tattered remnants of joyous laughter now corrupted by sorrow. Ferris wheels loomed above like skeletal arms, and the air hummed with a vibrant horror that sent tendrils of goose flesh rippling over my skin. Looming beneath the poverty of spirit, I heard it. A bell pealing from the heart of the ghost town. I could feel the urgency in its call. Approaching it, I felt a creeping sensation of déjà vu, washed over me as if I had wandered here countless times before, lost in an endless loop where nightmares collided with half-remembered dreams. I stumbled into an empty tent, draped in torn, weathered fabric, and there in the center a carousel spun, slowly, lazily, against the nauseating pulse of the darkness surrounding me. Each horse was a cruel caricature, their painted eyes glistening with malice, their mouths twisted into silent wails, as if calling out for a rider lost to the shadows. In the midst of it all lay a mirror, large and cracked, reflecting dim silhouettes of those trapped within. Their faces morphed from fear to anger, from anguish to pleading, each visage a testament to the agony of those who had dared to step through to this place of torment. Then, the bell rang again, louder, sharp, ear-piercing clarity amidst the despair, and a figure materialized from the depths of swirling shadows. It wore a familiar guise, draped in shadows that melded with its short, gaunt frame. "Do you recognize me?" the figure asked, and dread coiled tightly around my heart. I wanted to scream, to shove the truth from me, but all I could do was stand paralyzed as the voice, twisted and intimate, slithered into my ears, igniting all the memories I had sealed away, those I never wanted to confront again. Just as recognition flickered like a dying ember, the carousel began to spin faster, unleashing a storm of darkness as I realized too late that an unseen force was closing in around me, and the shadows of the long-lost, anguished children were rising once more. They came together in a grotesque amalgamation, eyes gleaming, mouths stretching wide in a soundless, echoing chorus. "Join us! Remember us!" they cried, the figure raising a hand towards me, waiting to pull me into their depths. But before I could think, before I could scream, the mirror shattered, scattering shards of glass across the carnival floor. As I faltered backward, glancing down at reflected horrors reaching upward from the abyss, I felt the grip of the shadows tightening like a vice, pulling me into the abyss once more, while the bell tolled with a haunting finality. And just like that, the world spun into darkness again, leaving nothing but a burning question echoing through my mind: was there truly any escape from the horrors that lay within? My surroundings faded to black, an oppressive void thickening with each pulse of time. The cacophony dulled, and for a fleeting moment, I couldn't tell if I was awake or ensnared in a nightmare. My limbs felt leaden, and I lay suspended in darkness, smothered by the weight of unanswered cries and forgotten laughter. Suddenly, blinding light sliced through the nothingness, igniting the edges of my consciousness. I was thrust back into the eerie carnival, but everything had shifted. The vibrant poster colors were drained, replaced by a muted palette of decay. The ground beneath me cracked and splintered like bones underfoot, releasing wafts of something sour and fetid that clung to the air. With trembling hands, I pushed myself up, glancing around in a frantic daze. The carousel spun wildly now, the horses shrieking in silence, while specters of children danced beneath it, faces twisted with longing, reminiscent of those who had faded long before this moment. Twisted memories whirled in my mind like shadows, desperate to be recognized and exorcised. "Let us play again," they implored, their voices faint echoes that crashed against my resolve. I staggered backward, my breath hitching, but the moment shattered when a sharp scream pierced the showground, a scream that came from inside me, echoing out like a shattered glass web. Before I could process the horror, the carnival lights flickered erratically, casting warped shadows that twisted and writhed in the corners of my vision. The towering Ferris wheel groaned in protest, its rickety structure contrasting with the raw, sinister energy that surged behind it. Was it merely a magnet for despair, or was it something far more malevolent? As chaos unfolded, I caught sight of a wretched figure entwined in the shadows beneath the wheel. A gnarled hand reached out, beckoning. When I squinted, I saw its facile visage contorted with grief and malice, eyes glistening with tears unwept. "Do you remember now?" It howled, voice a rasp like an autumn wind stirring dead leaves. "It was your laughter that led us here, your joy that invited us into darkness. Come back to the light or surrender to the shadows." I flinched, biting back bile as memory surged, a child's innocent delight interlaced with dark, forgotten secrets. A montage of balloons and cotton candy, laughter soon suffocated by sorrow, churned through my mind's eye, each vivid frame a heavy chain binding me to this cursed place. The screams surrounded me, warping into chaos, and in that maddening instant, the carousel halted abruptly. The eerie silence flooded the space like an alert sigh. All eyes turned to Meholo, yearning stares from the ghostly children, their bodies shifting under the oppressive weight of unrealized dreams.